Hey everybody, welcome back to Ready Steady Play. Today I'm going to run you through the rules and the setup for Clank, a deck building game from Renegade Games, and also Clank Sunken Treasures, the expansion. This doesn't add a whole lot, so I'll probably just explain the rules as though you're playing with it, and I'll put up a little Sunken Treasures bit on the bottom of the video so that you can skip it if you don't have this. So Clank is a 60-minute 2-to-4 player deck building game from designer Paul Dennen. But the premise of the game really is to collect the most loot and the most treasure and the most valuable things and get out of the dungeon alive. And get out of the dungeon before your friends, because the minute you get out of the dungeon, the dragon's going to realize that her stuff is gone and she's going to get really, really mad and start raging. And when that happens, pretty much everyone is going to die in short order. So you gotta make sure that your friends don't leave while you're still down at the bottom of the dungeon hunting for fancy treasure. Inside the box, you'll find the rulebook. Great, we don't need that because we're making this video. You can find the board. This is double-sided, so it's got two different boards on it, which is great. You'll find a deck of dungeon cards. These cards represent treasures that you'll find in the dungeon, devices that you can use when you're in the dungeon for various different kinds of bonuses, and it also contains the kinds of monsters you'll face in the dungeon that you can defeat for further bonuses as you make your way through the depths. We've also got a deck of cards here that will represent our starting decks. These are the feeble and weak skills we have when we go into the dungeon. Fortunately, we can use these cards to buy more cards that represent better skills. So as we go through the dungeon, we'll become better and more accomplished adventurers. Which basically just means, the deck building part of the game. We're going to buy cards and put them in our deck. We've also got this generic goblin. There's 1 million goblins in this dungeon. He's double-sided because he doesn't actually go in any decks. He just lives in the dungeon and you can just kill them over and over again. You get like a gold every time you do it. So if you find yourself with an excess of energy, why not spend all that energy brutally murdering millions of goblins, because honestly they're infinite. You'll never run out of goblins. We've also got various cards here that can form a sort of a persistent marketplace. These cards exist outside of the dungeon deck and represent things we can buy or have at any time. We've got a secret tome that's just worth shitloads of victory points. We've got a mercenary here who will help you with killing goblins. And we've also got Explore, which is a card that allows you to buy more better cards, but also to move around the dungeon, which is incredibly important. You've got a dragon token here, which will sit on the dragon rage meter. More about that later. We've got little secrets, which are things you can find in the dungeon that give you a bonus. We've got a dragon bag. This is how you determine who gets hurt when the dragon wakes up and attacks everybody. More on that in a bit. We've got little player bags here. These will have a little player meeple and these square tokens. These square tokens are used to track your hit points, but more importantly, they're used to represent your clank. We've got all kinds of tokens here that represent artifacts. Artifacts represent the shiniest and most appealing or exciting loot in the dungeon. So you can't actually leave until you get an artifact, because really nobody's going to be impressed with your endeavors and your efforts if you don't have one of those precious artifacts. We've got some major secrets. These are just bigger tokens that represent sort of things that you can find in the dungeon. And we've got money, and that's it. More player colors. The expansion, for anyone who's thinking about getting it or interested, this comes with some supplementary rules, not many of them. It comes with another 2 boards, and this is great because really with these 4 boards, you don't really need more boards. To be honest, I almost only play with these ones anymore, and it's absolutely fine. It also comes with a bunch new cards that sort of do new things based on these new boards and just add more variety to your dungeon. And it comes with a goldfish. This is the underwater version of the goblin, because what Sunken Treasures does is it adds underwater stuff. So you can kill the goldfish over and over again and just get more treasure. The dragon won it at a fair. Now that we've looked at what comes in the box, I'm going to set up the game. I'm going to set it up for a game of Sunken Treasures, but again, when we're going through stuff that only comes with the expansion, I'll mention it to you. Honestly, there's not a lot of differences. So I've got everything out of the box and I'm ready to start setting up the game. Here's the board I've chosen. It's the castle side of the Sunken Treasures board. And as you can see, it's added some underwater stuff. This is really the unique element that Sunken Treasures puts into the game. We've got our 2-player starting decks. Each player starts with a deck of 10 cards that's the exact same. And our players have chosen their starting heroes. Here are our starting heroes. It's very important which color you choose because each color has a different weapon. The red guy is Spearman and the blue guy is Swordman. Other than that, they're entirely identical. Do you want to be Spearman or Swordman? There's also Wizard Guy and Yellow Guy. This is the Dragon's Rage track. This is going to track how angry the dragon is and how many attacks it does each time it wakes up and attacks us. Now, because we're playing with 2 players, we'll start here. But as you can see, it starts further down the track the more players you have. That's probably because there's more people making Clank, so it's going to get angrier quicker. So, as I said before, the most important thing really are the artifacts. The artifacts are these tokens here with the treasure chest on the back. The artifacts come in varying degrees of awesomeness. As you can see, this ring here is kind of shit. It's only worth 5 points. Whereas this censer here is worth 30 points, and it's the most valuable artifact in the game. Adventurers will be trying to pick these up. Each adventurer can only carry 1 artifact, and once you've got that artifact, then you're free to leave the dungeon at any time. This adds a sort of element of pressure luck as you try to get more points than your opponents, but also don't want to get left behind with the dragon going into full-on rage mode. Which is what happens when someone leaves the dungeon with one of her precious artifacts. So if we're playing with 4 players, we'll put all of these out on the board. If we're playing with 3, we'll return 1 randomly to the box. And if we're playing with 2, we'll put 2 randomly back in the box. In this case, because I'm setting up for a 2-player game, I'll randomly select 2 of these and put them back into the box. The rest will be placed on the board with their matching symbols. So in this case, we've got an urn that goes here, an ankh here, the ring is here, the bananas go there, and the armor goes there. Perfect. We've also got 2 mastery tokens which look like this, and are awarded to anyone who gets out of the dungeon alive. What do I mean by that? Well, obviously we're dealing with a very angry dragon here. And when that dragon, what pisses off that dragon more than anything is thieves coming into her dungeon and stealing her junk. So the dragon could well go into full rage mode if we steal enough of her stuff and kill us. Now, if you die here in the depths, which is the section of the board underground, you're eliminated from the game completely and you lose. So in a 2-player game, that means the other person's the winner. And it doesn't really matter how many victory points you've got because you're dead. If you die here above ground, what that means is that actually the townsfolk come and rescue you. And if you have the most points, then you're still considered heroic enough or, proficient enough to be worth something. You're cool. You're still a cool guy, even though you didn't make it out alive. You're just knocked out. So basically what I'm saying is you get 20 bonus points for leaving the dungeon. The next thing we'll do, I suppose, is put out these monkey tokens. This is the monkey temple room. If you go into the monkey temple room, you can pick up one of the monkey tokens. More on how you pick up stuff later. Suffice to say that these are also worth points if you get out with them. That's pretty neat. Why is there a monkey temple room? Who knows? But you get points if you go in there. That's pretty neat. I mean, points is how you win. So one of the things that the Sunken Treasures expansion adds is this marketplace board. The marketplace board is just a board that you can put items that you buy in the dungeon on. There's a bunch of stuff you can buy. You can buy backpacks. You can buy keys. You can also buy crowns. Finally, Sunken Treasures also adds Scuba Gear you can buy. These 3 you can buy in the regular game, and if you don't have this market board, you just put them at the side of the board. Backpacks allow you to carry an extra artifact. That's right, you can have 2 artifacts. That makes you an even more badass adventurer, because you got 2 of the super awesome things. People are going to think you're well cool. You can get keys. These open up locked corridors, allowing you to get around the dungeon more efficiently. Crowns are just worth points. but they combo with some dungeon cards, like there's a princess, and if you get her in your party and you have a crown on, she really likes that. We've also got a Scuba Gear. This allows you to move through the water sections unhindered. Sometimes it's slow because swimming is hard and tiring. Also, it allows you to breathe underwater, which is great because normally you can't and you might drown. So I'm going to put my marketplace board over here on one side with all of these fat loots that I can buy as I go through the dungeon. Basically, I have to land in these market squares to buy them. Then we've got these secrets. These are small secrets. These represent things like sort of potions that allow us to move around the dungeon. That's a potion of swiftness. This is a potion of bravery. That gives us, that's a potion of healing. This heals us if we get wounded. There's a potion of bravery that makes us better at swinging a sword. We've also got some bonus money and dragon eggs, which are worth victory points. But if we take them, the dragon gets madder. So I'll put out 2 minor secrets on each tile with this little round question mark symbol that matches the size. You can sit quietly and watch me do all of them. They should all be face down. It's supposed to be random. You also get 2 more potions of bravery with the Sunken Treasures expansion. These are major secrets. They're like small minor secrets, but better. There's a whole bunch of different kind of major secrets. These ones give you victory points. These ones give you bonus skill points. These are worth money. These ones let you draw more cards, and these ones heal you. That's great. Sunken Treasures also comes with this potion of heroism, which gives you bonus stuff like a sword and a boot and a health. I'll let you figure out what all of them do exactly on your own time. So we'll just put them down in these rooms with the big secret. So we're going to take the big secrets and put them out in the rooms with the big secret symbols. Note that unlike the minor secrets, there's only 1, not 2. Unlike the small secrets, of which there are exactly the right number, the big secrets are, there's always some left over, I guess to make it a bit more random. Ooh, what's gone in the dungeon and what's been left out? Who knows? You'll have to pick up all the other ones to find out. Sunken Treasures comes with 2 extra minor secrets. In this case, these 2 potions of bravery, because the board is slightly bigger and there's slightly more minor secret spots. Great. So that's pretty much the board set up. I've got Nikki the Dragon in the right place. I've got all the secrets out. I've got the artifacts out. I've got the mastery tokens down. I've got my common cards set up here. I know that these are the common marketplace cards because they have the yellow banners on. I've got my 2 monsters here. Remember, Goldfish is from Sunken Treasures, but these are the monsters that are so numerous in the dungeon that they can pretty much be killed infinitely. Now I've got my dungeon deck here. It's been well shuffled. Got all my stuff in there. So the next thing I'm going to do is reveal 6 cards from the top of the dungeon deck that are going to represent our starting marketplace for purchasing more cards. I guess they represent sort of what's in the dungeon, in the opening rooms of the dungeon, so to speak, or whatever you imagine them to represent. We've got an Elven Dagger. Neat. We've got a Watcher. The Watcher has an arrive effect. This is something that happens when you draw them. Note that these effects still activate during setup. This says all players gain 1 Clank. All players gain 1 Clank. Well, shit. So we take our Clank tokens and we put them here in the Clank pool. A bit more on how the Clank pool works later. But remember, arrive effects activate even on setup. Next, we've got a Wizard. Neat. Like wizards, they're great. You can't see that. We've got a Belcher. Well, he's a tough monster. He's also got this dragon symbol here. That's very important. We've got the Mountain King. Great. That seems like he's just loitering in the entrance to the dungeon. We've got Cave Troll. Well, he's also... Wow, he's tough, man. He's also got the dragon symbol. And that's all 6 of our starting cards. However, these 2 have the dragon symbol. This symbol represents the dragon waking up and attacking us. When you draw this symbol during the course of the game, every time you draw it, not every time, but, more on the dragon symbol later. Suffice to say that any cards that are drawn during setup of the dragon symbol are shuffled back into the dungeon deck here, and replacement cards are drawn. Cool. No, that one has to go back too, because it's got the dragon symbol. Go in there. Get me a different one. Oh, for God's sake. Get away, Kobold. There we go. Cleric of the Sun. Praise the sun! So now that I've got my dungeon set up with my dagger and my watch and my Cleric of the Sun, I'm pretty much ready to go. At the start of the game, we'll determine who goes first. The player who goes first adds 3 Clank to the Clank pool. The player who goes second adds 2. The player who goes third will add 1, and the player who goes last will add 0. Everybody's going to start the game with the same deck of 10 cards here. This is the most common card in your starting deck, Burgle. It's got this blue skill symbol on it here. And what this represents is essentially a resource that allows you to buy more cards for your deck. I'll explain how that works in just a minute. We know these are from the starter deck because the headline is gray. The next card is Sidestep. Sidestep has a boot on it. These boots allow us to move around the dungeon. Scramble here is basically just a mashup of Burgle and Sidestep. It's got a skill point on it and a boot. We've also got 2 Stumbles. Stumbles give us +1 Clank. That means we'll add Clank to the Clank pool just like we did when we drew the Watcher card at the start of the game. Stumbles are bad, but you have to play them. For anyone who knows how to play deck building games, this will seem very familiar. But there are a few key differences. You'll start with this deck of 10 cards, which you'll shuffle up. At the start of the game, you'll draw 5 cards. On your turn, you'll play those 5 cards. You have to play all of the cards in your hand. You can't not play any of these cards. In this case, I've got a Sidestep, a Scramble, and 3 Burgles. However, if I'd had a Stumble instead of a Burgle, I would have to play that too. And when I play it, I add a Clank to the Clank pool. Then I total up the resources that appear here on my cards. I've got 3 skill points and 2 boots. Boots can be used to move through the dungeon. We move through the dungeon along these white corridors here. So I could go 1, 2. That's my 2 boots spent. Then I've got 3 skill points remaining. I can spend all of these resources. When I'm buying cards from the dungeon, what I'm looking at is the blue cost in the bottom right-hand corner of the cards. Now, it's worth noting here that I can't afford any of these cards. So I might just buy an Explore from the common pool for 3 instead. When I buy an Explore card, I add it to my discard pile for my deck. I don't have a discard pile yet, so I'll make one. There we go. I'm now done. I've taken my Clank. I've spent all my skill points and boots. There's nothing left for me to do on my turn. So, I put the cards I played from my hand into my discard pile and draw 5 new cards. If I'd bought any cards from the dungeon marketplace here, I would then replace them with cards from the dungeon deck. If I drew any with the dragon symbol on, the dragon would then attack. And I'll explain dragon attacks in just a minute. So I've got my Explore in my discard pile. I've been through 2 turns now, and I've got all 10 of my starter deck cards in my discard pile. I need to draw 5 more cards, so I just take the entire discard pile, I shuffle it, and I draw 5 more cards. Note that the only time you shuffle your discard pile is when you need to draw a card and you cannot. You then immediately shuffle your discard pile and reset your deck. Typically this will be when you're drawing a new hand at the end of the turn, but if you have cards in your deck that allow you to draw cards during your turn and there are none left for you to draw, you draw as many as you can and then shuffle your discard pile and reset your deck. Cards that are in your play area, which are cards that you've played on your turn from your hand, perhaps like this, remain in your play area until your turn is entirely finished, which means that if you need to reset your deck during your turn, then these cards will not be returned to the discard pile and reset into the deck until the end of the turn. Playing cards from your deck essentially gets you 3 resources. Blue diamonds, which are skill points, yellow squares, which are boots, and red circles, which are swords. These represent 3 resources or resource types. The cards generate them all simultaneously, and really the only time you need to think about the order in which you play cards on your turn is when you have cards that instruct you to discard cards from your hand. If a card says discard a card, draw a card, for example, then you would have to still have cards in your hand in order to discard one to draw another. This is literally, as far as I'm aware, the only time you wouldn't want to just play all of the cards from your hand simultaneously, because everything else is simultaneous. For example, if you have a card that says -2 Clank on it, that allows you to remove 2 Clank from the Clank pool on your turn, and you have, let's pretend, no Clank in the Clank pool, you could, during your turn, remove 2 Clank from the Clank pool anytime you generate this Clank, whether the Clank comes from playing cards from your hand, cards you draw and then play from your hand, Clank generated from moving around the board. That -2 Clank that happens when you play that card is an effect that will persist throughout your entire turn. So, unconventionally, unlike a lot of other card games, most of the effects in this game are not tied to the moment you play the card, but will continue to affect you throughout the entire turn. For example, there's a card that says if you play another companion card, this will give you a bonus. Well, that doesn't actually matter when you play the other companion card. If you play it later, the bonus will trigger retroactively. That's important to remember. Let's talk about those boots in the yellow circles, because how you interact with the board in this game is pretty key. As we saw earlier, Mighty Red Spearman Meeple here got 2 boots and moved 2 spaces into the dungeon. These white lines here represent the corridors within the dungeons, and you'll move around the rooms following these lines. Some lines have arrows on them, which means they can only be moved through in one direction, following the arrow. However, without an arrow, you can move along in both directions. You'll notice that this corridor here has 2 boots on it. That means that it costs 2 boots to go through this corridor instead of 1. So if I've only got 1 boot left, I can't go through here. That's too bad. However, if I've got 2 boots, in I go. When you enter a room with a secret, you just pick up that token. You reveal it to everybody. In this case, it's 2 bonus skill points. Now this can be discarded because it's an immediate effect. You'll see that this corridor here has a padlock on it. That means I need that key treasure I talked about earlier to get through there. Well, here it is. If I have this key in my possession, which just means face up on my player, by my player, because I bought it, I can go through this corridor. If I don't have this key, I can't go through this corridor. This room has a heart in it. When I go into this room, I immediately heal 1 of my hit points. This room's pretty crazy. It looks like a crystal cave. It's also got a gold in it. That means it's a treasure room. When I go in there, I instantly get a gold. Here's the gold. It's mine now. Huzzah! It also is a crystal cavern, which means it's huge and cavernous and really, really large. When you enter a crystal cavern, even if you've got boots left, you can't move any further this turn. That is the end of your movement, and you must stay there until your next turn. Actually, there are some cards that allow you to teleport into adjacent rooms. If I had a teleport that sent me to an adjacent room, say down here, I could use that and then teleport in here. Then I'd get to draw a secret. That's great. Oh, it's a dragon egg. Fuck, I've made the dragon mag. But the point is that I can't actually now continue my movement out of this room. Even though I was able to teleport in here, that doesn't count as movement. That's just teleporting. If I have any boots left, though, I entered a crystal cavern on this turn already, so I have to stay here now instead of in there. If I were to end my turn in the crystal cavern and walk into here next turn, I have to go through this corridor with this scary face on it. What does that mean? Well, that's a monster symbol. Going through this corridor means I'm attacked by some ambiguous, unknowable monster. I take 1 damage. However, this can be prevented by spending swords. Swords look like this. If you play a card with swords on, then you have swords. You can spend those swords to defeat this monster and you won't take any damage for going through this corridor. This leads me into this marketplace room. What is this room? Well, there's 4 of these on the board. They look like this. Some have different things in them. This one has secrets in. When I enter the room with a secret, I automatically get to draw one. Great. It's the dragon egg again. These 2 marketplace rooms actually have artifacts in them. When I enter a room with an artifact, I don't have to pick up that artifact if I don't want it. I might want to wait and hold out for something better like this one. When I enter a marketplace, I can buy 1 item from the market. Note that I can't buy 2 items. I can only buy 1. If I want to buy 2, I have to exit that room and then come back in again. These are the marketplace items. We discussed them earlier. The backpack that allows you to carry an extra artifact. The key that allows you to move around the board. The crown and the scuba gear that allow you to move around underwater and just give you more points. When you buy the crown, you take the top one. The next one's worth slightly less. This means that all of these things cost 7 gold pieces. Remember that gold we got from the treasure room earlier? Here it is. You need 7 of these to buy 1 of these things. At the end of the game, each coin you have is worth 1 victory point. These are only worth 5, except for the crowns that are worth 10, or less. So make sure that you spend your money wisely. This is a tough decision. But these enable you to get more points later because artifacts are worth the most points, so probably. Oh no, I dived through this room and fell into the water. I get a secret. It's a healing potion. Awesome. I also went through this symbol. What does this bang symbol mean? That means I generated a clank. I take a clank and I add it to the clank pool. I've made noise. Nikki will be mad. Now that I'm underwater, I got to deal with these crazy symbols. What do these mean? Well, you can see here that they're the same as the boot symbol we saw earlier. That means it costs 2 to move through here. However, there's also a flipper. That means it only costs 1 if I have the Scuba Gear. Here it is. Here's the Scuba Gear. If I'd been smart and bought this earlier, I could save movement underwater. Yay! I'm going to use my key and go through here. What does this finger mean? This means I go all the way around the board. And I come back in on the other side of the board. And that pretty much covers all of movement. It's not really that complicated, and there's only 4 symbols that you have to remember on the board, really. So it's pretty straightforward. The key thing to remember is that you need to move through, you need boots from your deck to move through rooms. So you'll be spending a boot every time you want to move through a room. I will talk now about the underwater section for Sunken Treasures. So if you don't have it, or you don't want to know about that, then you can skip ahead. Traversing the underwater section is a lot easier if you have Scuba Gear, but if you don't worry, it's not that bad. If you start your turn underwater, you must leave water that turn or else you're going to take damage. If you don't have Scuba Gear and you start your turn underwater, you must leave the water. Even if you come back again, it's fine. Just make sure you leave the water. For example, if I do this, doop, now I'm not underwater, boop, I'll be fine. At the end of my turn, I won't take any damage. If I go from here down to here, at the end of my turn, I will take a damage because I didn't leave the underwater part. So I've got to start my turn underwater and end my turn underwater without leaving the underwater section. Then I'll take a damage. Everything else, totally fine. Also worth noting, Scuba Gear allows you to move around more freely. That's about all it does, though. If I start my turn not underwater, for example, I start my turn up here, and I go underwater, I'm fine to end my turn underwater. If I start underwater and I leave, also fine. Be careful not to get caught out, though. It is easy to get caught underwater and take damage. Also, we only have 10 hit points, and then we're dead. So, be careful. So now we're back here at the dungeon marketplace. We've got some skill points to spend. All of these cards cost different amounts of skill points. For example, this mercenary costs 2, and when we buy him, he goes into our discard pile. He gives us 2 swords and another skill point, so when we play him, we'll have more points to buy stuff with. We'll also have swords. We don't start the game with any swords, so he's a good way to get some early on. He'll allow us to kill goblins that get us money. He'll also allow us to travel through corridors with scary monster faces on them without taking damage. You don't want to take damage. Damage is really bad. So you can spend swords to kill monsters. We discussed the goblin earlier. He's infinite, so you can spend, if you have 6 swords, you can kill 3 goblins and get 3 gold. That's great. You can get 3 gold, because it says defeat, 1 gold. Great. For Sunken Treasure players, the goldfish is also available to be killed. But he can only be killed if you are underwater, and then you get 3 gold. But he takes 3 swords to kill. So he's more lucrative than the goblins, but also more limited. The Watcher is a monster that exists as part of the dungeon pool. And it says here, defeat, get 3 gold, all other players get +1 clank. You'll note that he takes 3 swords to kill. And if you choose to defeat him on your turn, he's just set aside in a discard pile. So we set our Watcher down here, off to the side of the board. This leaves a gap in the dungeon market that will be filled at the end of our turn. We can also choose to buy these cards in the dungeon market. Something else you might see in the dungeon market is this purple bannered item here. This is called the Vault. And it says here, deep, use only in the depths, which means you can only use it if you're in the underground part of the board. Remember the underground part of the board? That's this section here, under the ground. So this has use 5 gold plus 3 clank. So I guess this represents you going into the dragon's vault and stealing a whole bunch of his money. That's why you get so much clank. Note that a device is never added to your deck. It's a one-use only, so you'll still spend 3 skill points on it, just like you would buying any other card from the marketplace that has a cost like this. But you would never put it in your deck. Instead, you'll put it in that discard pile we had earlier. So, 3 kinds of cards in the dungeon deck. Red banners, monsters. Purple banners, devices. Blue banners, things that are added to your deck, like companions and treasure and stuff that are useful. It's worth noting that some of the cards that are added to your deck, like the Mountain King Companion here, have the green victory card symbol in the top right. This means that they are worth victory points at the end of the game. All of the cards with this symbol, you'll get them out of your deck at the end of the game and add that to your total victory points, making them extremely useful. The secret tome is in the perpetual marketplace. That's the marketplace that doesn't get reset and never goes away. It's very expensive and doesn't do anything, but it's worth 7 at the end of the game. So that's a good way to get some victory points if you feel like you're behind. It's the end of the round and we've got to replenish the cards we bought from the dungeon market. Oh, we've got a sapphire here with the dragon symbol on it. Yeah, we got the vault here with also the dragon symbol on it. This triggers a dragon attack. Holy shit. Now, it's worth noting that even though 2 dragon symbols have been drawn, it's only going to happen 1 time. So the dragon will attack if any number of dragon symbols are drawn at the end of the round. When the dragon attacks, we grab all of the clank in the clank pool, we put it into the dragon bag, we mix it up a bit, and then we check the dragon rage track. In this case, the dragon is here on the third space, which means we're going to draw 3 cubes from the bag. Here we go. I've got 1 black generic dragon cube. There it is. So the bag starts with 24 of these in. So at the beginning of the game, you're relatively safe. Wah! Oh, there's a blue one. That means the blue player is going to take a damage. And there's a red one. That means the red player is also going to take a damage. We'll take the cubes we drew and put them on the corresponding player's health tracks. If at any point during the game this track fills up and this skull is covered, that player is dead. Note that when the player dies or gets knocked out, this is the same thing. It just means that if you're in the depths, you're out and you're eliminated. And if you're in the top half, the villagers will come and rescue you when your health track is finished. So when you enter a room with an artifact, you can pick it up, or you cannot, up to you. If you pick it up, you just put it, you collect it, you put it on the side of the board. It's worth noting that you can only carry 1 artifact if you don't have the backpack item from the market. So once you've got your artifact, you might as well leave, right? Well, there are other ways to gain points. For example, if you go into the monkey temple, you can pick up one of the monkey idol icons. These are worth 5 points. That's pretty good. When you enter a room, you can only pick up 1 thing, and then you have to leave and come back if you want to grab another thing. So between the monkey idols and the cards in the dungeon and stuff, there are plenty of other opportunities to grab victory points. But you might decide it's in your best interest just to hightail it out of there, get that mastery bonus, and trigger the final countdown. Hooray, Red has made it out the dungeon. He gets to have one of these mastery tokens. That's worth 20 points. Awesome. Now that he's out of the dungeon, what happens? Well, he'll go here onto the first place of this countdown track. He'll then progress on his next turn to the next space. While he's out here on the countdown track, he cannot be attacked by the dragon. He's not affected by anything that affects players. He is basically, for all intents and purposes, scot-free and not even really here. When he moves onto the space here, he'll trigger a dragon attack. What we'll do with this dragon attack, which is going to... because the dragon's mad now, he's left with all the dragon's stuff. She's pissed off, so we're going to get a dragon attack with the damage on the rage track. So if our dragon's up here, we're on 4 rage. Plus 1. So we'll draw 5 cubes, five cubes from the bag. Then the other player, or the remaining players, will get a go. Then red will move up here. Then we'll do 6, because there's 2. When red gets to the end of the track here, everybody dies. They're all knocked out. So if they haven't made it out of the dungeon, then they're eliminated. If they got into the top half, then they're knocked out and they just don't get their mastery tokens. So they've got to get out of the dungeon before the player gets here, or everybody will be sad. At the end of the game, everyone will count up their victory points, and whoever has the most will win. So the red player is counting up his or her final score. We've got 25 points for this artifact, 7 points for this major secret, 3 points for this minor secret. We've also got a whole bunch of cards here that are going to give additional points. And finally, the red player also has 11 gold pieces. This is worth 11 victory points as well. So the red player will total all of this stuff, and that'll be their final score. It's worth noting that in the event of a tie, the player with the most valuable artifact is declared the winner. So for example, dragon armor beats golden bananas. If at any point you run out of your Clank tokens, then that probably means that you're in serious trouble, because they're probably all in that dragon bag. That means you're probably in danger of imminent death. So if you have run out of them, basically don't worry. They'll be coming out of that bag and returning to your health meter very, very soon. So that's just about it for Clank. I don't think I've forgotten anything, but if there is anything that I've forgotten, please leave a comment in the comment section below to let me know, and I'll put a note in the description of the video. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope you'll come back tomorrow when I'll be delving into the dungeon. In fact, I'll be delving into this very dungeon with my friend Graham to see which of us is the greatest medieval burglar. See you there.